I didn't think I'd ever be a homeowner in general. I thought I'd be living in apartments for the rest of my life. So
Erica Givens has a place to call home.
Can I get a spicy regular with pepper jack cheese? I didn't have any experience with the job at all, so I didn't know what that entailed.
A lot of our kids that we come in don't come in with the work ethic that he has. So I feel like a lot of that could have been learned at Shepherd.
Marshawn Hendricks found a job.
I would say without Pastor Jay and Shepherd, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at on the police department.
And Joseph Sims is patrolling the rough area where he grew up. All three Hoosiers, testimonials to the work being done at Shepherd Community Center on the Indianapolis East Side.
We want to break the cycle of poverty.
Meet the man who's been in charge at Shepherd for 30 of the 40 years it's been around. CEO Jay Height on the business of changing lives, physically, emotionally, and in the classroom. He's my guest on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Crime, poverty, simply getting something to eat, even loneliness, all part of the dynamic for many people living on the Near East Side of Indianapolis. Jay Height and the people he leads at Shepherd Community Center have been working for decades to make change in the community and put the people who live there on a path to prosperity. And I'm pleased to welcome to the podcast this week, Jay Height. Jay is the executive director of the Shepherd Community Center, really an institution on the Near East Side of Indianapolis, really for the entire city of Indianapolis. And Jay, welcome. Great to connect with you again. How are things?
Well, it's busy. We're headed into the holidays, and with all that we do year round, it just adds on to the holidays. But those are great opportunities for us to invest deeper in our families. And at a time when some families are very challenged, it gives us the opportunity to try and help alleviate some of that and to create more friendships. The epidemic that's ravaging our communities is loneliness. And we really, really want to make that connection.
Yeah. I've always thought that I guess you'd call it a tagline or your brand kind of identifier at Shepherd is breaking the cycle of poverty. And I think that's really, really powerful. Talk about that line, what it means to break the cycle of poverty. And then tell us a little bit about Shepherd, because you're doing so many different things and have done so many things for so many years. Talk about the services and the things that you delivered to the community.
We have been very blessed and have grown substantially, but we've stayed true to this purpose. We want to break the cycle of poverty. And so we're talking generational issues. And I would say a lot of times that's as simple as letting someone see that they have some type of future orientation, that they don't have to stay in the world that they see, that they can continue to move on and can continue to grow, that they can have a future. And so we are working heavy with students, and that's where we really try to put a lot of our emphasis. So today we'll probably be engaging with over 500 kids, whether it's in our school that we operate, our child care center that we operate, our before and after school care for 2 IPS elementary schools, as well as our own school. The work we're doing inside of Howell Middle School, Arsenal Tech High School, Purdue Polytech High School, where we're trying to engage with students. And so we want to engage with both generations, both the first and second. But the 6 key areas that we're trying to focus the services on: hunger. It is a continued challenge for us, all of us. When we go to the grocery store, it's like, wow, that was expensive.
Yeah, and the hunger is such an issue, and of course Jim Morris, who passed not long ago, was such an advocate globally and here in Indiana on that issue. But with inflation, with prices, it's always a challenge, I'm sure, from a food standpoint. But what kind of pressures has inflation put upon you?
Yeah, I would say while inflation has gone down, the prices have not. And so some would report 26% more expensive than a few years ago to go to the grocery store. And so what that forces for folks who are probably paying too much for their housing already, too much a percentage, that they have to make tough decisions on what do we eat and what do I cut out, because the pie isn't getting bigger. And so us being able to help food isn't the end, it's the beginning in the relationship, that we can stabilize them. We want to grow their capacity to reduce dependency. So helping make sure kids are not hungry, and making sure that families in a variety of services. We have a great partnership. Fred Glass and Gleaners do an amazing work, and we're great to have that partnership. We're working on housing, and within a 5-mile radius of downtown, rent for a 3-bedroom house or apartment has gone up 60% in the last 2 years.
Wow.
And so you're paying $1,800 for a 3-bedroom home, and that just doesn't fit into the equation. So we have some homes that we work with families to live in. We announced just recently a partnership with Arbor Homes to build 11 new homes. And again, a home doesn't change a life, but it gives us the tools to stabilize them so that the other things can come in. We're dealing with health issues. We have a full-time Eskenazi paramedic on our payroll in a partnership with the city to work with families in our neighborhood around health. The key, Gary, is moving from sick care to health care. That's a mindset. And so we're trying to build up access, working with Riley to expand mental health services for children and teenagers. It's a great challenge. A lot of the work we're doing inside of IPS is helping kids deal with mental health. So we do vaccination clinics in partnership with our great friends like at CareSource and others, the state Department of Health. We're also going to work in helping jobs. And so here's one way any business could help is create internship opportunities for young people. We want to expose it. You know, my first job in my life was in 7th grade delivering morning newspapers in Dayton, Ohio. And there's a couple things I learned. If I got up at 4:30, I could run or do my paper out. If I waited till my dad woke me up at 5:15, I had to run it. And those who know me know I am not a runner. I am not built for running. And so I learned a discipline to get myself up. And we want to help get these kids out. We did career explorations during fall break with them, and it was great. And these kids all of a sudden understand that there are careers that they never knew. And so then we're also going to work around education, and that's where the bulk of it is, whether it's helping support the work of IPS and places like Purdue Polytech in before and after school care, and through our summer, our own school, helping our kids be able to read. And we want to own a community, not a location. So how do we take the Near East Side and help quality educational seats for every kid? And that means we're investing heavy into the schools around us, and as well as our own. And then ultimately, as I've said, Gary, epidemic is loneliness, isolation.
Yeah.
And we have to do a better job as a community of learning how to connect. And so our 2030 vision is to re-neighbor the hood.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about loneliness, what are the big contributors in your view to that? I mean, a lot of certainly the pandemic was a big contributor a couple of years ago, and probably things persist from that. The internet, digital things. There's the digital divide too, which is a separate issue. But what do you say is contributing to this loneliness epidemic?
Well, we're living life at 70 miles an hour, right? Even if you think of the architecture, Robert Putnam, sociologist from Harvard, wrote the book Bowling Alone, and then he wrote another great book, Our Kids. And he talks about the loss of community, those organizations that we used to come together, but we're just running so fast. Growing up at 240 West Norman in Dayton, Ohio, my parents sat on the porch in the evenings, and he parked in the garage. I mean, he parked in the driveway so he could talk to our neighbor who came home at the same time. And I was spanked by every mom on that block. We all knew each other, right?
Yeah.
But we've gone to garage door openers and the porch moved to the back and then privacy fence. And so 31% of Americans know their neighbors' names.
Hmm.
And so we no longer live in community. And so with that, as Putnam says, if you don't have community, you don't have social assets. If you don't have social assets, you can't pay for the social change that needs to be made.
Yeah. Lots of challenges, I'm sure. What's the biggest one? You talk about the loneliness epidemic and dealing with that, but are there other things that really keep you up at night? And you have so many things going on there at Shepherd, so many buckets to fill, if you will. What keeps you up at night in terms of the biggest challenges?
The hopelessness of our youth.
Hmm.
I have this vision of making Indianapolis the greatest city in the United States for kids, where every kid feels like they belong. If you will,
Yeah.
the TV show from younger days, Cheers, where everyone knows your name.
Yeah.
But I see the hopelessness. I hear things like, if I make it to 19, when I get shot. And that is not the cause. The cause is this isolation and loneliness that I don't feel like anyone cares. I think it was made worse by COVID. And I don't blame anyone. Folks made the best decisions with the knowledge we had at the time to try to keep us all safe. But I think there's some long-term consequences to that isolation. And I think that we have a group in my 29 years here in the Near East Side. My family, we've lived here, we work here, we worship here. This is our neighborhood. I've not seen the level of hopelessness
Huh.
and mental health challenges for the youth. The fight or flight mechanism, social media. How many fights are we hearing about because of social media
Mhm.
and then the proliferation of guns. And I understand and fully respect and support the Constitution. I just don't know why a 15, 16-year-old has a gun. I don't know why folks have access to guns. I was joking with someone. I said it used to be, could we bring back the swirly? Because if I really got mad at you, we gave you a swirly, right? Today it quickly goes to violence that alters lives forever.
Yeah. What players do you most connect with or need to connect with in the community to help address some of these issues?
Well, we are having multiple conversations weekly with IPS and with the schools that we're in. Here's and Eskenazi does great leadership there. Riley, we're blessed to have them in this town. But what we need more conversations and connections with are the actual youth. I feel like the conversations happen around them. And so thanks to the Pacers, we just hosted 100 Arsenal Tech students for a mental health day just recently. We did the Colts in the spring, and it's less of us talking and more of us listening.
Hmm.
They want to be heard. They want to share, and they want to know that they have my attention and that I'm not having the conversation and telling them what they need to do. I think we can do more listening. And so it's how do we, yes, partner with these others, but how do we connect to the kids and their families?
Yeah. What are some of the, and I'm sure there are many, and so when I ask you this, you probably have to think about it, but success stories. Because I know there are many, but you get so bogged down in all the challenges and things on a day-to-day basis, you probably don't think as much about it. But talk about maybe a success story or two that's really had an impact on you, an impact on your life.
Well, one of the blessings for my wife and I, Jane, to be here as long as we have is to see those kids grow up, right? And to see Joe, who is now a field training officer for IMPD, and a kid who came through our programs and now a long-term IMPD officer, training other officers in the neighborhood where he grew up, and just had his wife just had their second child, and this is a guy who uh, helps us out when he can, but his passion is because he always wanted, and like in the summer programs, we take the kids to the zoo. And he said, you know what, I always wanted? I wanted to eat at the zoo. But we never had that money, and so he and his wife save up all year to pay for those kids to be able to eat at the zoo because he thought that was so important. Denise, who serves on our board, but was a kid who came through our programs, and she's a leader at One America doing amazing things. One of my colleagues in leadership here is Curtis, who was one of the first kids I worked with. He was a knucklehead. And I tell him now in his 40s, he's still a knucklehead. Love him dearly. And he is helping reach kids in ways because this is where he grew up. This is it. And so seeing those, those come to mind right away.
Yeah.
Yes, there's many. I love it when I'm out in the community and able to connect with, at the grocery store or at the restaurant with those. Luis, who came through our programs, we got him a job at O'Brien Toyota, who's one of their top mechanics. Now he's one of the top leasing agents in the city for at properties. Luis is doing well, and Atanai, who's at ADP, who for her family in her 20s bought her own home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I am so proud of these kids, and I know they're adults now, but I'm officially old, so I can call them kids forever.
That's great. Really make an impact, no doubt. You mentioned Jay the Pacers, and one thing I've always been impressed about at Shepherd is your focus in kind of building a model of partnerships in the community with businesses and other organizations. And I know there are many, Elanco and Lilly mentioned the Pacers. Those are substantial. And while it sounds like an obvious thing to do, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. You've been very intentional about it, and I assume it's paid dividends.
Well, it does because it has to be win-win. Partnership isn't me coming to you saying, here's what I need you to do for me. It's, what does a victory look like for you as well as for me? And then how can we come together? And sometimes we help our partners maybe more than we receive, but ultimately, I talk about IPS. We put a lot of resources into IPS. We put a lot of staff in there. Why? Because I want kids to win.
Right.
And IPS is the vehicle. I miss, as you mentioned, Jim Morris. What a tremendous leader and convener, and a man who taught me about leadership through influence. We're blessed to have the sports teams that we have here because they are engaged in this community. But even more than that, what I tell folks, a Pacers game employs my neighbors, a Colts game, an Indians game, the track. These are all employers that provide those types of income to our families that are essential. And so they're more than just an entertainment for our city, more than something for us to rally around. They're an economic engine that helps my neighborhood.
Yeah. Are there other cities? I've always been amazed at Indianapolis and that public-private partnership and all the successes that have been built here over time. Have our challenges, no doubt, but so many successes. Are there other cities from a nonprofit, operating in a nonprofit environment that you look to that do things that are, you kind of copy or look at? Or maybe a lot of people look here at what's happening in Indianapolis in the nonprofit sector.
Well, I tell folks we're very blessed because it's not this way. Not every sports team engages at the level that every one of ours does.
Yeah.
And so don't take that for granted. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I worked in Cincinnati, and they did not have the engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Reds, yes, the Bengals were not that engaged, and it just not. And that's not a criticism. I'm really excited that every January the Cincinnati Reds come to Shepherd to talk to the kids. And
wow, that's great. Yeah.
They do their tour, and for me, it helps these kids, reinforce education, and we've had some of our own connections to Major League Baseball coming through here, and greats like Marty Brenneman. But it shows these kids that sports is a business.
Yep.
And there's lots of jobs in that business. And we want them to have dreams that they can achieve, and we want to help lay the groundwork. And I think other cities look to us. We've had great leadership, and you know that.
Yep.
And it was more than just Jim Morris, though he was an icon. And I think there are a lot of great leaders out there today who, not just political, not just those elected, but it's those business folks who say, this is my community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm blessed to have on my board Mike Smith, and Mike is involved in so much. And I know that guy loves me dearly, and he holds me accountable and makes me better.
Much more ahead with Jay Height, the executive director at the Shepherd Community Center, talking a little bit about Jay's path to Indianapolis. Started out as a TV guy, a journalist, a reporter. So I want to talk about that and a lot more when the Business and Beyond podcast continues. Stay with us.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Jay Height. Jay is the executive director of the Shepherd Community Center here in Indianapolis, an organization focused on breaking the cycle of poverty on the Near East Side of Indianapolis, but its impact certainly extends beyond that as well. Jay, you've been, so next year, 2025, Shepherd Community Center hits a landmark, right? 40 years in business. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yes, I am thankful. I'll have been here 30 of that. I'm not the founder. The founder is a good friend of mine. He and his wife work at a hospital in rural part of Kenya, Africa.
Wow.
And they have a long history. And so we had those who had a vision and made it happen. And then I was able to come in and build upon that. So I'm very thankful, and we're excited, but I want the conversation to be about the next 40.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about, before we do that, and we do want to touch on that, your path. As you mentioned, you've been here about 30 years, 30 of the 40 years of Shepherd Community Center. You didn't start out in the nonprofit sector. Give us that path, because it's rather unique. You were in TV, right? And got smart enough to get out of TV, the TV business. You were a congressional aide at one time. Give us the path to Indy.
In college, I got a degree in political science and mass communication, 2 degrees you can do absolutely nothing with, and at Wright State University. Mm-hmm. And so my wife thought she would tell you she thought she was marrying a U.S. congressman. I worked at 22 Alive News, at that time the NBC affiliate in Dayton.
Dayton, yeah.
And my boss was the general manager, Johnny Walker, who was an icon there in Dayton. And I would do fill-in reporting and weekend assignment editors. I can remember the days of having like 6 different scanners going off all at once, and you're supposed to be listening to all those things. And when the cameras were actually the size of a semi that you had to put on your shoulder, and then you would walk sort of lopsided. And then I met a congressman. His name was Bob McEwen. He was running in a primary and wanted me to come work for him. And he ran against a guy named George Voinovich in the Republican primary. Well, you've heard of Voinovich, and you've probably not heard of my congressman, so you know who won the primary. Yeah. Bob is a great guy, still very active. We talk periodically, but he opened the door and had me go. I was trained in Ronald Reagan's White House to run campaigns by the RNC, and so I had jelly beans up until a few years ago when my wife said, those things are gross. It's one black glob. They got to go. And so I thought my life was going to be in politics. And I appreciate that, because I got trained by some of the best in the world, fundraisers and community building and all of those things. And I realize now God was preparing me for a path that I didn't know. I did have a heart for the city, started a ministry called Target Dayton in Dayton, Ohio while I was involved. Things happened. I left politics and ended up going full time in 1992 in Cincinnati in an area called Over the Rhine.
Mm-hmm.
And I served there for 3.5 years and then had the call to come to Indianapolis.
Was there a moment, kind of that aha moment, if you will, entrepreneurs talk about when you made that switch to kind of the nonprofit and that giving back sector, if you will?
Yeah, I think, I was privileged to grow up in a home. My father was a GM worker,
Mm-hmm.
machinist, and my mom babysat, sold Avon, all of those things. And my parents were very involved in our church, but also in helping others. That was just a culture. It
So
wasn't a
you learned it.
program.
You learned it that at home.
Yeah, at the kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a high school student, had the privilege to go serve in Washington, D.C. and for a couple weeks. And so this desire started building and I really thought that I would have the opportunity to use those things to influence, maybe in DC. And instead, it's given me the ability to influence from the grassroots orientation and to speak into things even now at the State House or at City Hall. I think where I am today is I am a pastor, but the director, and I serve a community that is served and represented by Republicans and Democrats. And so I work in and engage with all of them, but try to use some of my experience and some of the challenge I've received was don't be involved in politics, but you need to be involved in government and advocating for some changes that we need and bring innovation to
Mm-hmm.
the human service world.
Well, you mentioned a moment ago, Jay, again, 40 years next year for Shepherd Community Center. You want to focus on the next 40. As you look at that vision for where you see Shepherd now and where you want it to be, what is that vision?
Well, we want to, by 2030, to have built a gymnasium
Mm.
because we want our family to have access. We want students to have an access to a place they can come and be involved and engaged, but we want it to be a gym for the community, not just a program center for us. We also we want to serve 4 times the number of kids that we're currently serving,
About how many do you serve now?
about 500
Hmm.
on a daily basis.
Wow,
We want to
that's
give
a big
that,
goal. Yeah.
yeah, 18, 20, 2000. And the reason for that is because then those represent families. And if we can, with the style of ministry we do here, working with kids and then their families, doing both gens, that we think we can begin to change a neighborhood by the number of families being served. And so that's really our guiding purpose of why we want to expand, not just to keep getting bigger,
Hmm.
but while we want to serve more, we want to only do that with it's a four times growth with a 2 times budget growth. Well, how do we do that? And that's through partnerships, and
Hmm.
that's through working with places like IPS and Purdue Poly and those others, to where maybe we don't always have to have those types of facilities, working with people like the Bonner Center and Elevate and Dream Alive and coming together and saying, it doesn't have to always be us owning it. I don't own anybody. We're here to serve and we can do that better together.
What are you going to need? You mentioned partnerships. How about the connection to the business community? What are you going to need to get to reach those goals?
I'm asking businesses to say, would you commit to support sending employees into Arsenal Tech High School and Purdue Poly and having lunch with kids? Just those personal connections, letting us bring students to explore your business, helping them understand what it is so that we can help them put together a life map so that they're getting the education needed to pursue that venture. It's saying, hey, you know what? We're going to help you reduce your costs because we're going to collect paper plates and cups and bowls for you.
Hmm.
It's those practical things, or we're going to come volunteer and help on a home build. Uh, we so appreciate Arbor Homes. We're going to take and build 11 new homes that are $300,000 homes 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and sell it to our families at $125,000 and give them 3 to 5 years while they're renting to get their income up, get their job skills up, get their credit scores up, and learn how to take care of home repairs and teach them all of those things. And they immediately have equity. By the way, my wife's signing me up for all of the home repair classes. Hopefully I can finally learn how to do something. But it's businesses like that who's saying, we can donate a portion of this to make it possible for folks to have a home. Whatever the business is, maybe there's a way that they can engage, and not just Shepherd. We're just one of many great organizations. It's helping Gleaners. It's helping these others like Bonner Center and our great partners at the Immigrant Welcome Center that are doing amazing things that we can work with to better serve our neighbors.
Well, it is impossible, Jay, to overstate the impact that you and the Shepherd Community Center continue to have on the community, and I really, really mean that. It's huge for Indianapolis. Sets a great example for the city and the state as well. So thanks for all you do. Appreciate you taking the time, and good luck with the next. Good luck with the 40th next year, but good luck with the next 40 as well, Jay.
Well, Gary, it's good to reconnect with you, and thanks for what you're doing.
All right. And thank you for listening in on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. We are a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and well beyond. And you can download all of our episodes and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.